Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by a radioactive book. Over the last couple of weeks I acquired a lot of books, so it's time for a book haul. It's kind of insane. It's about 27 books, and so let's get right into it. Please excuse me that I won't talk about each book for a long time or give like a really detailed synopsis, because there are so many books that I'm going to talk about. A lot of books are actually like second or third parts in series. I will link all the books I talk about in this haul in the description box down below, and for the ones where I am having like the second or third book, I always will link the first book in the series, so you can see a fresh synopsis of the really #1 book in the series and won't get spoiled maybe by going to the page of a second or third book. So bear in mind, for a lot of the books there will be like the first book in the description box down below. So let's get started. First off, we have Be My Enemy by Ian MacDonald, the second installment in the Avernus series. This is a kind of YA-ish steampunk series where a young boy can time travel, or not time travel, but travel between, I think, parallel universes with a blimp, and he's on the lookout for his father. I think that is the series. I already had like the first and the third book, and for some reason I never had gotten to buy the second book, so I remedied that now, and now I have the complete trilogy and can start reading it. Next up we have The Vagrant by Peter Newman. This is a standalone, and if you look carefully at the cover you will see one of the very interesting things. The main protagonist is carrying a baby around, and I even read that the main protagonist is actually a mute. So why is a swordsman carrying a baby around? How can a novel work when the main protagonist is a mute? These are very interesting questions, and I hope Peter Newman will have interesting answers for me. Next up we have For Honor We Stand by H. Paul Honsinger. This is the second installment in his Man of War series that seems to be a military SF series in the tradition of John Scalzi and Robert Heinlein. I don't know much about it, but it was like the offer was the book cost €2, and for an additional €3 you could get the audiobook in addition to that, and I already had the first one because it was recommended by a friend of mine, so yeah, I bought the second one practically blindly. Another military science fiction series is the Frontline series by Marco Cluse. The first installment is Terms of Enlistment. This was actually, I think, on the Hugo list, and Marco Cluse took it back. That is all with the whole Hugo controversy kind of thing. I won't go into that much detail because I'm not a huge fan of awards, so yeah, just that. But it seemed to be like an interesting book, and despite all the controversy it had quite good ratings, or at least yeah, very interesting reviews, and I was interested, and I got the same deal as with the last one, so for €3 I got the audiobook and the Kindle version, so yeah, basically a no-brainer. Next up we have Iron X, the first book in the Books of Blood and Iron series. If that isn't a typical fantasy title, I don't know. And yeah, that seems to be the case for this book. That seems to be very, very traditional fantasy. The main protagonist is called, or is a troll boy, so he's, I think, kind of a half troll. There is a war between trolls and elves, so there are even a lot of like typical fantasy races. And I have to admit, I read a lot of fantasy, but I haven't actually read a very traditional series. I think I haven't read a book that really had like elves or trolls in it for quite some time. Okay, The Weight of Blood by David Dalglish had elves, but I won't count it because it was such a bad book. But yeah, so a lot of the things I read nowadays are more like humans with intrigue, political intrigue, stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see how a more traditional series plays out for me. Next up we have the Venutian Gambit, the third and final installment in Michael J. Martinez's Daedalus series. I'm just reading the first book and I'm really loving it. It has parallel storylines, a science fiction storyline where some miners and scientists investigate some issues on Mars, and then there is a really interesting second storyline set in the 1700s, where ships, actually sailing ships, are able to sail the seas but also go into the void and sail through space, and the humans kind of colonized the planets in the solar system, and it's really Master and Commander in space with historical elements. Really interesting series, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to finish up the whole trilogy. Next up we have The Brass Giants, the first installment in Brooke Johnson's Chronica City series. Here we have, it's as you can guess from the cover and the title, it's a steampunk. We have a female protagonist called Petra. She is a tinker, and she wants to move up in the guild of tinkers or engineers, and she gets the opportunity to work with an experienced tinkerer, and they are then involved somehow. They want to build an automaton. I think maybe the brass giant that is in the title, and there's a conspiracy and they have to flee. So that seems to be a very typical but interesting sounding action adventure steampunk novel. Speaking of steampunk, next up we have Vermillion by Molly Tanzer. This is a book I saw at SFF 180, so Thomas introduced it to me. It has a very interesting promise of a female gunslinger, Eloise Lou Merriweather, who investigates, I think, or is involved in a weird Western scenario in San Francisco. I think she's kind of a ghost hunter or something like that. Yeah, and the premise sounded very intriguing, and yeah, I really like the cover art of this one, so yeah, I bought it. Next up we have Spiramirabilis. It's the third and I think final installment in Aidan Hart's Wave trilogy. That seems to be a more military-focused epic fantasy about a company that is tasked in the first book with building a bridge and crossing a river. So yeah, military epic fantasy, and now as I have like the full trilogy, I can engage it. Next up we have Altmans Ghost, the second installment in Tom Lloyd's Empire of 100 Houses. I think that is kind of a mix-up between an epic fantasy and sword and sorcery, so it's focused, I think, in a fantasy city where we have an elderly investigator as the main character, and it sounded really intriguing and promising, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to get into this series. Next up we have The Mechanical by Ian Tregillis. This is the first installment in the Alchemy Wars. This is again a kind of alternate history, steampunkish series where I think the Dutch actually developed those mechanical men powered by alchemy and have armies of them, and therefore rose to the dominant power in Europe. And so yeah, it is an alternate history scenario, and that seemed very, very intriguing. And Ian Tregellis had another series out, a trilogy, and that got a lot of critical high praise. It was, I think, way beyond the radar of a lot of actual fantasy and science fiction readers, but that might be also, yeah, something very interesting to check out. And Ian Tregellis seems to be a very, very good and promising young author. Next up we have Lord of Ashes. Again, I think it's the third and final installment in a trilogy by Richard Ford called Steelhaven. Again, with or like the Tom Lloyd books, it seems to be a mix up of epic fantasy with a bit of sword and sorcery, based in the city of Steelhaven. So yeah, if you are a fan of epic fantasy, then you might want to check that out and read the synopsis. Next up we have another book that was recommended by Thomas from SFF 180. It's called The War by B. Kettling. That seems to be a very, very interesting concept. It's set in Africa, where there is this huge forest, magical forest called the War, and we have various protagonists. A cyclops who is schooled in the cellar of a building, a hunter that creates a bow out of some kind of magical tree or something like that, and it all seemed like very, very bizarre. Thomas did a review of this and said it might not be a book for everyone, but because it's very complex and demanding. But yeah, that sounded really, really intriguing to me and right up my alley. Next up we have the book and the series with the most complicated title, and I hope I get it on the first try. The book is called The Singular and Extraordinary Tale of Mirror and Goliath, and it's the first installment in Ishbel B's The Peculiar Adventures of John Lofthart series. Wow, that's a mouthful. It is recommended for people who like Neil Gaiman or Catherine M. Valente, so it has, looking at the cover, it has a more like steampunkish, magical touch. It's set in 1888, and yeah, it's about a girl called Mirror and her shape-shifting guardian Goliath. And I think they meet up with this John Lofthart, who is in the title of the whole series, and they have magical adventures. I don't know much about it, but yeah, the cover really intrigued me, and that seems to be a very interesting read. And staying with the steampunk theme, I also bought the 5th installment in Mark Hollis' Burton and Swinburne series. The first book, or the one I bought, was The Return of the Discontinued Man. The first book in the series, The Strange Affair of Spring Heel Jack, was one of my favorite reads of last year, and this month I'm starting a buddy read session with Caitlin from Kitty G for the second book, The Curious Case of the Clockwork Man, and we both are very excited about the whole series and want to buddy read the series. The 6th book of the series comes out in August, and I hadn't gotten the 5th one so far, so I remedied that. And another 5th book I got is Nemesis Games by James S. A. Corey. It's the 5th installment in the Expanse series. This is a very interesting space opera series set in the more near future, and where the humans only kind of colonized the solar system. The the science there is very real, although the focus is really more on the space opera and the drama aspect. This series will get a lot of exposure in the future, because I think in fall there's going to be a TV show on Sci-Fi based on the Expanse series, and I think then a lot of you will going to see that book and the whole series all over the place. And the last book I bought for myself on Kindle was Smiler's Fair, the first installment in Rebecca Levine's The Hollow Gods series. This is a fantasy series. The Smiler's Fair is actually some kind of circus or fair, and there are a lot of POVs. I think we are following 5 main characters, and all of their stories somehow intersect with this kind of fair. That book came highly recommended by Caitlin from Kitty G, and so I bought it. The second installment will be out in July, so maybe I try to read it soonish to see if I want to continue with this series. Yeah, but I'm really intrigued by it. Next up, we have 3 books I've got as art copies from NetGalley. The first one is Iron and Blood. It's a new steampunk series by Gail Z. Martin, co-written I think with her husband Larry Martin. Gail Z. Martin is known for her fantasy series, so she had like what was it called? The first book was called Summoner, but I think it's called Chronicles of the Necromancer, and a follow-up series was the Fallen Kingdoms cycle. She also had like a third series out there, so she's a very established writer of epic fantasy, and now she's branching out into steampunk, and that seems very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to review this book. Another review book I've gotten a while ago, but I think didn't show on the channel so far, is Deadeye by William C. Dietz, the first installment in the Mutant Files. It seems to be a cyberpunk book in the near future, 2038. It's a series that is published now rather quickly, because the first book came out in January. There is a second coming out in July, and I think the third installment is already announced for next January or December or something like that. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to review it. And the next review copy I got is Knight's Shadow, the second installment in Sébastien de Castel's Greatcoat series. This is marketed as a fantasy version of the Three Musketeers, and I already own the first book, haven't read it yet, but I'm really looking forward to get into this series. So now we're heading into the final segments, which are a few books that I haven't gotten yet, but I already pre-ordered them, and so I thought I could include them here. We start that segment off with Oathkeeper, which is the second installment in J.F. Lewis's Grudgebearer trilogy series. That series was marketed also as a very epic and complex fantasy series. I'm really intrigued to see where the series is actually headed. I have the first book, again haven't read it yet, but it seems very intriguing, and so I already pre-ordered the second one blindly. Another book I pre-ordered is The Liar's Key, and same as Oathkeeper before, it is a June release, so it hits later this month. It's the second installment in Mark Lawrence's second series, The Red Queen's War, which is also set in the same world as his Broken Empire trilogy. I read the book Broken Empire trilogy and really enjoyed it, and therefore I want to see the new series and check it out. Haven't read the first one yet, but I'm pretty sure, because I know Mark Lawrence's writing, that I'm going to like the series, and therefore I got the second one. Next up, I pre-ordered Queen of Fire, the third and I think final installment in Anthony Ryan's Raven Shadow series. I really enjoyed the first one, Blood Song. Tower Lord, the second book, is on my TBR for June, so I'm really looking forward to continue with the series and then hopefully finish it up in July when Queen of Fire hits. And I can tell exactly the same story again because I pre-ordered the Price of Valor, which is the third installment in Django Wexler's Shadow Campaign series. It's a flintlock fantasy series with a huge focus on military aspects, but also with great characterization. Read the first book and loved it. Have the second book on my TBR for June, and the final installment releases in July. And you might want to spy a pattern there. I pre-ordered Ruin, the third installment in the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I read and really liked the first book, Malice, in May. I have Weller on my June TBR and already started it. And yeah, Ruin hits in July, and I want to continue with the series. This is very traditional fantasy with a lot of tropes, but very, very well written. And the final book of this haul that I also pre-ordered comes out in August. It's The Dark Forest, the second installment in Xi Jingliu's science fiction saga, the Three Body series. I've read the Three Body Problem last year and really, really enjoyed it. And a lot of the Chinese readers that commented on my review video or on the live show we did for the book actually said that the first book was really more like a prequel. And now with the second and then the third book, the series really explodes, and a lot of people say this is like the or this book did in China like the same thing that Dune did in the Western world for the science fiction community. So I'm really, really interested to continue with the series and read The Dark Forest. So, wow, that is a massive book haul, and to make the video not even longer than it already is, I'm going to cut it short here. I hope you enjoyed the books I showed you. If you did, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel. Until next time, I hope you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye!